Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business on this very special episode, one of many that we're doing here. The title of this group of episodes is called Education Elevated, Creating Durability with the Modern Learner, brought to you by Education Dynamics. And I got to ask you first, if you're listening to this, what comes to your mind when I ask you to describe today's modern learner? What springs to mind is likely quite varied and depends quite a bit on your institution, program, role, and experiences. It's not as straightforward as you might think. The modern learner can be working adults, parents, veterans, lifelong learners who are juggling multiple responsibilities while pursuing their education. The modern learner is also younger, recent high school graduates on a direct path to graduation. The lines between adult and traditional students are blurring as both education and students evolve, and it's changing the game for higher ed. So welcome to this special 6-part mini-series on the EdUp Experience, where we're diving deep into the world of the modern learner. I'm your host, as always, Dr. Joe Salustio, and I'm thrilled to be your guide as we explore the challenges and opportunities these learners bring to our campuses, virtual and physical. Joining me on this journey will be friends from Education Dynamics who've spent the past 35 years serving, supporting, and engaging a rapidly evolving higher ed ecosystem. And over a series of several months, we'll be bringing you periodic episodes of this mini-series where we're going to talk to some of the brightest minds in higher education about how to adapt, evolve, and thrive in this new landscape. We'll uncover strategies for building a more durable, agile, and energized approach to serving modern learners. And we're going to discuss everything from enrollment and marketing to student success and the future of education. But as you know, I don't like to do any of this alone. So I have an amazing guest co-host returning again, ladies and gentlemen. Let's bring him in appropriately. He's Greg Clayton. He's the president of Enrollment Management Services at Education Dynamics, a.k.a. Eddie. What's going on, Greg?
Hi, Joe. It is great to be here. Great to be here. Glad to be back. I think I remember all the rules of the road for being a co-host.
Well, you know what? We're going to find out how your memory is, Greg. We're going to find out here live. So don't make it's all good and it's all fun. You know, I always say that this podcast, the work that we do on this podcast, much like you do at Education Dynamics, is all about iteration. You test and you make some mistakes, and then you get better, and then you get better, and we like to leave in those mistakes because it helps us learn for the next time. After 900 episodes of this podcast, I'm still learning, Greg, how to be a good podcast host, so I'll take my cues from you this time.
And don't forget optimize. We optimize.
Oh, yeah, optimize. By the way, let me just quick plug, and this isn't nobody asked me to do this, but obviously for those that know, I've started a new role. I'm the Vice President of Industry Engagement at Ellucian, and I recently came from an institution where I brought on Education Dynamics, and you guys helped me absolutely kill it. In fact, I can tell you that the institution that I came from currently now has nearly doubled their online population directly due to the efforts of Education Dynamics and the support that you gave us. And I can tell you that my colleague that's there still at that institution, they are just doing incredible work with you all.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. We're super happy you brought us on, and the work has been amazing. They're great partners at that institution, and we're just, the sky is the limit with how far we can go with them.
Well, speaking of great partners, we're bringing back I think we're bringing him back for a fourth time in this podcast, but the first in a while since we did a panel together. In fact, at Insights EDU March, April it was, and we had a good time and a back and forth talking about the future of higher education. So I said, we got to have him back here and we can talk about what is this modern learner? How do we think about the learner? Ladies and gentlemen, here he is back for another time on an EdUp mic. He's Dr. Melik Peter Curry. He is the president of Unity Environmental University, America's Environmental University. What's going on, Melik? How are you?
Hey, Joe. Hey, Greg. Thank you for having me back on the show. Always up for a good conversation.
Good things happening at Unity. Every time we talk to you, Melik, it's like, okay, we're going to bring Melik back. There's some good things happening. Let's catch up with him. And then it's like, wait a minute, there's some more good things happening. We got to catch up with them again. And then more good things happening. And we got to catch, it's like the growth is just not stopping. Can you give us a little bit of this? First of all, for anybody that hasn't heard of Unity, just give us a quick 2-minute elevator and then tell us some of the good things happening.
Sure. I mean, Unity Environmental University started as Unity College in 1965, like many of the small private residential colleges back in the day. Over the last 65 years, we've always been at the forefront of trying to figure out how to best serve those individuals out there who really care about the environment, but understand that it's a green career and not just the more traditional concept of more of an ethereal conversation. And, over the last 10 years, we've evolved from being primarily residential freshmen. Earlier you talked when you introduced the show about all different kinds of students to what would an environmental science university look like if it had a kind of like a private system with multiple subsidiaries, each supporting a different kind of learner in a different kind of modality, in a different kind of personal situation. And so we've really growing to become one of the most affordable and accessible and flexible private environmental science institutions in the nation. A lot of my team say we are becoming the real online STEM school with both in-person, remote, and residential options for those who want it.
Change is easy in higher ed, right, Malik? I mean, all this is just, it's been super easy for you to do, right? Now, it's funny. I interviewed another president a while back. I can't remember where, but I remember him saying that he was, quote unquote, assassinated. There were 2 assassination attempts. This, I don't know if that's in poor taste now because of what's recently happened, but he was speaking of it figuratively, as in no confidence votes, as in backlash, people trying to get him out of his role because he was trying to enact significant university change. Can you talk a little bit about the experience to get from A to B and what it's been like for you?
Sure. I think, as you know, the higher education model was ported from Europe from the 1800s, and until about 70 years ago was really designed for 5% of the population. The governance structure, I mean, it really was, you send your students to the monastery, they come back 4 years later, transformed. And, in 1965, we as a country decided that this type of education should be afforded to everyone. And we took an unscalable, highly privileged model that really only worked for the heavily subsidized and the hugely, those institutions with huge endowments, and tried to mass produce it. 65 years later, we are trying to create a model that's a monolith of a model, if you will, that as if all universities are the same. I mean, Joe, let's assume you and I went to college together. And I am going to get to your question. You are the child of a trust fund. And
I wish that were true, but
I know, right?
But yeah,
yikes! And I was a child where basically I needed to get a job in order to pay my bills. You and I, our lifestyle can't be the same, right? You can stay in and play guitar and follow your passion and all of that. I have to get a job in order to pay for tuition and pay my bills. I think sometimes in higher ed, we created this governance structure that was always designed to protect something. And as these tuition-driven institutions have grown, the Department of Ed, the accreditors, the institutions, we look at all of us as a monolith. So I'm not surprised that that individual had a hard time, because my guess is their governance structure was designed around having a president whose job is to protect the status quo, and they never updated their policy, their governance, their structure, their decision-making paradigm to be a tuition-driven institution. So yeah, if you were to ask a monarch about a democracy, it wouldn't work. If you were to ask a democracy to run as a monarchy, it wouldn't work. And so we as an industry have to diversify and look at each institution as, who are we? Are we a highly subsidized? Are we a tuition-driven? Who do we serve? And I think that's where your colleague faced that, because this one-size-fit-all has been, I would say, the reason many colleges have closed.
Tell them like it is.
Greg, I want to come over to you to take over here, but I want to just say that that recently, and you'll have to clarify when, Education Dynamics came out with the naming of the modern learner. I don't know what you call it, the main naming or the packaging of the modern learner because more of the behavior of the learner, not of the characteristics or the profile, so to speak, but the way that we're behaving with technology and choosing and wanting different things. And I got to tell you, I think it is brilliant. Right? I think it's brilliant to describe the type of student that we're working with. In fact, I was telling our colleague Eric that I've been using it in episodes to describe, because I had one university recently, college president, I was talking to you. Some of these things you guys won't believe. And he's describing things to me. And he says, and this is who we call the adult student. And I went, wow, we got to catch up, all of us, to, the adult student's kind of an old way to say it. So over to you. Where did this whole idea of the modern student come from? And how'd you pick it? What does it describe? And then you can take it from there.
Yeah, great question. We have been studying, researching the preferences and behaviors of, let's just call them learners for right now, for over a decade, 13, 14, 15 years. And, we produce studies we release to the market. There's one called the Online College Student Report that we release every year. You can go download it from our website. And over time, we really look at what's changed year over year from the different studies that we do, and you just observe things. And what we observed over the last 5 or 6 years, and it really accelerated during the COVID period, is that the average age of the learner was becoming younger and younger. And it got to the point where, kind of the phrase behind the term modern learner is a phrase that we came up with that says that age is no longer a predictor of learner modality preferences. So stop thinking about, our advice to the industry is to stop thinking about learners in the context of age. Start thinking about them simply as learners. And we came up with the term modern learner to describe it. And it does not matter how old the learner is or where they are along the journey. What matters is how they engage. A first-time freshman student, whether they are first gen or second gen or whatever, they engage in points in time along their journey and path through high school. And an adult learner engages much faster than that, within 2 to 3 months, and they want to start, very quickly and all the things. But the overarching message to learners about the benefits of higher education, about the benefits of learning, are all the same. Some of the same questions arise from the learner that they want to have a conversation with an institution about before applying and enrolling, are all of the same. So there's more of a unified approach that we see, and a unified message to addressing the needs of that learner. And we think that what Unity has done, Unity was doing this in 2019. They were thinking, actually, Melick was thinking about this before that, before 2019. But we first started engaging with Unity in 2019. And it was a great match for us because we think about the learner in the same context that Melick was thinking about it at the time. And I'm curious to ask Melick, how did he develop the vision for Unity Environmental University? Because I think when the first time we spoke in 2019, Unity had somewhere around 500 students, and you were really trying to get that pivot off the ground to go online and address the modern learner. And you had a real vision for it, that, in doing it in a way that no other institution has done. So how did you come up with that?
I mean, I think for me, without going to a very, very long story about kind of my experience through colleges and universities, from R1s to small private residentials to online schools, I think, what you and Joe were talking about the modern student is key. I realized very, very quickly that access to education did transcend market segment. And we wanted to put specific age groups tied directly to specific modalities. We were confounding modality with age. We were also looking at anything that was not a residential lecture-based education as a secondary form of education that was there to support the real education. So when we came up with the enterprise model, what we said is, no, some folks are looking for residential, some folks are looking for commuter, some folks are looking for remote, some folks are looking for online. So by creating these kind of don't confuse quality with modality and really look at the lanes with which people were looking for different flexibility based on where they are in their lives, allowed us to really lean into differentiated calendars, differentiated pedagogy, differentiated tuition. A 37-year-old woman who has a full-time job in California would care less about a football team. And why does she have to work within the same governance structure, the same approach as somebody who does? And so your concept in education dynamics about the modern student kind of resonated with us a little bit, because we really started to kind of look at each and every one of our subsidiaries for, it didn't matter how old you were. It was more, how did you want to learn?
Epic.
Right? I use the example of like music. Do you like your music live? Do you like your music in vinyl? Do you like your music streamed? It doesn't change the song. And I think over time, we've confounded online to mean keyboard, when in reality, it just means untethered. So for us, Greg, what we were trying to find out is, Tinto came about, said this: most students don't complete their education, not because of their academic readiness, but for things outside of academia. And we've ignored that. So it was really more about that. And Greg, I think your company knows this about us. We also made some really interesting assumptions that were proven wrong. We just assumed that the adults would want to be more flexible and remote. We found out all of our students, regardless of age, like the one course at a time. We found that when students were able to just, take a hybrid model of where they might take a few courses online, take a few courses in person, that was more preferable to the all or nothing. So it was about creating a model that was iterative, that allowed us to make assumptions, but not get so tied into those assumptions that when we were wrong, we saw it as such shame that we would rather close or fail than adapt. I mean, you remember, we picked a term model that we changed after 6 months. Mm-hmm. We changed a tuition model that we changed after a year. We picked a service model that now each and every one of our subsidiaries has a different level of academic and student support. And I think too many times as higher ed, we just create this perfect product and are looking for people to buy it instead of saying, where are our students? What are they looking for? And even though the science is science, chemistry is chemistry, where, how, when, and the modality in which that they want to learn it can be different. And that, I think, is where you and I kind of started this journey. And I mean, I remember we were hoping to have 100 students a term. Now we're talking about 1,000 students per term with the same level of anxiety as 100. Cheers. There is demand for quality education. And I would say stop looking at what is the real university and what are the ancillary pedagogies, and look at each one as if they were their own lane, their own faculty, their own staff, their own pedagogy. And I think any institution, if they look at that, not what is the main and what is the secondary, I think has a better chance of adapting to the modern student.
Boy, I got lots of questions, Greg, so keep going if you want.
Yeah, one more. I think Malik said a key word there: accessibility. We talk about that a lot, and everything that Malik was communicating there kind of points to the thinking of students first, or thinking student-centric versus institution-centric thinking. And accessibility is like a real key to it. Like how do you keep the whole system efficient? How do you keep it affordable? And how do you make it accessible and even more accessible to all the things Malik just checked off, as we've learned, and as Unity has learned, over the course of the work. And one thing that struck me, I did get a chance to go to Unity's commencement in May. And as part of it, there's something really I thought was brilliant. There were a lot of graduating students there from their distance education program, from all over the United States, and some from all over the world. And they had a map of the United States, and the graduating students could go and put a pin in the map with where they lived. and they had a globe, and you could stick a pin in the globe from what country you were from. The pins were all over the place. It was fascinating to watch those students come and put a pin in the map of the globe wherever they were. And that really drove the accessibility point home to me, that this set of programs is reaching a universe of students that are looking for what Unity has to deliver. And everything was captured in that, in terms of what Malik just said about being student-centric in the thinking.
By the way, one of the states I've not been to is Maine, and I've yet to have anybody invite me there. So I don't know.
Well, Joe, let me be the first on air to invite you to our May graduation. We are actually going to have a high-profile graduation speaker that you're going to want to meet. So consider this an invitation, and I'll work with you on the logistics.
Maybe we'll podcast live from the graduation at Unity Environmental
That would
University.
be awesome. Consider it done. Let's work out the details later.
That subliminal message wasn't so subliminal, but I do want to bring this up, and this is something that I see, Greg and Malik. I want to see what you think about this, but let's come back to the concept of the modern learner. This is a learner who has certain behaviors that I believe are evolved from the behaviors of the past, just like anything else. Technology evolves, behavior evolves. Universities typically, though, and the ones that, when we think university, we think 200 years old and blah, blah, blah. It's just, but those universities, and I want to know what you did here, they don't market the right way. They're very traditional in their thinking. They do this billboards, and they do this and they do that, and they say, but we want more students that come from the some college, no credential group. But we're going to get them by doing, mature email campaigns over the next 6 months. And it's like, well, wait a minute. The thinking about marketing and how to market to students has to evolve too. How did you move Unity from the traditional marketing to evolved marketing?
Sure. I mean, Greg loves the story because one of his colleagues tells the story every chance we get. I think, Joe, it is amazing how many universities, if you ask them about the cost of acquisition, they would have no idea. I mean, I remember being a director of admissions, bringing in 200 students, and my president said to me, I need you to bring in 400, but your budget is the same, cutting my cost of acquisition in half, but having no idea what I meant by that.
It's fuzzy math.
Many institutions don't even understand the concept of, you can't have a regional recruitment and marketing strategy and hope for a national draw. A lot of folks don't differentiate the idea that some programs are more expensive to recruit, some programs are more expensive to teach. I mean, this concept of market segmentation, national versus regional, this idea that I know the amount of institutions who are struggling because with SATs being optional, you can't buy names. What do you do? Right?
So right.
And so I think for us, I went through a couple of years of frustration because I worked with a lot of firms trying to help us really get our message out there. And we were a nail and they were a hammer. If I hear one more time about discount rates and we need to analyze your student population, I'm like, no, you don't understand. My student population is dwindling. If you actually get that persona, you're going to find me students who don't exist. Everybody is digging into a drying well. You can't look backwards. You have to look forward. So finally, when I was talking to Greg, they were the first organization that actually didn't mock us. They didn't laugh at us. They didn't look at us as a small player, because back then we wanted like 50 or 60 students at a time, but said, look, there is a population of students out there that doesn't even know we exist. We know how much we can afford to pay for recruitment and marketing at our tuition price point. And we started to experiment. I bet you a dime to a dollar, there are many institutions who don't know the lifetime revenue of a student. They don't know the cost of teaching. They don't know the cost of acquisition. And I think that's the problem, because up till now, Joe, everybody went to college. Everybody knew the value of a college. Well, that was the case when only 5% went, and when it cost you $600 to go to college or you got a scholarship. So I think, people sometimes get mad at me because they say I talk about students in such kind of like statistical terms, right? Cost of acquisition, market segmentation. And I say, don't get mad at me. Get mad at your government for not funding education to the point where we don't have to change. But until such time as education is free, I am not going to let education, especially environmental science education, only be accessible to those lucky enough to get a scholarship or go to a residential program. So until you fix the global issue about education, or at least the US issue, I'm going to try to find a way to get that. And for that, you have to understand, are you regional? Are you local? Are you national? What is your competition spending? What is your value proposition? We are, for our distance education, for example, we retain at an average of 65% a year. That is unheard of in the online open in the world. But we did not take a residential model and put it online. We changed, our learning design, our instructional design, dedicated advisors. There is a lot of work that goes into taking a gasoline fuel car and creating an electric one. It's not simply, using the same engine. And so, Joe, I know that was a very long answer to your question, but at the end of the day, you can't assume that your recruitment budget is static, and you cannot underestimate the cost of your of your vision, whether it's local, regional, or national. And that's kind of where I think people make a mistake.
Yeah, and Greg, I'll pass back to you, but I want to, the second part of that is the identity politics that have to be worked out. You even getting to that point where you want to go after a different segment of students, you have a group of people internally that go, well, wait a minute, we don't want to do that. We here's who we are, and then you get another group of people that go, well, that's not who we are. We're this school, and so even within colleges, you have differentiation, you have different opinions of who the target student is, and then therefore you have a bunch of policies that back into one type of student, to Melik's point, and then you can't do what you set out to do, which is to recruit a different type of student, Craig. So those are just some of the things that I have written about and get frustrated with. It's really nonsensical when
Joe,
you think of it.
Before Greg goes, you raise a point where I think has been the fundamental game changer for us. Think about this. If you are a small, private, residential, tuition-driven institution, your faculty and your staff are good at that product,
Yes.
Right? They are also having full-time jobs. So no matter what new audience you bring to the table, right, to a hammer, everything is a nail. So if you seriously want to create a new audience, a new market, a new demographic, right, the idea that those people have to do what they do and also do that is part of the problem. So sometimes it's a lack of investment. So for example, with us, we told the folks who cared about that side of the house to stay doing that. And I actually made the promise that anybody who jumped into this new pedagogy and this new audience, that we would backfill the positions. You can't have your people think that is a sense of loss. But you can't have a university that is a single product university. What I mean by that is residential, the 4-year lecture base, and try to recruit people who are looking for different experiences into that and wonder why. Think about this. If I'm a 42-year-old man, do I really care about that ice cream social? Do I really care about this idea that orientation is about kind of something to gear towards a freshman? Nor should I have a freshman have to sit through an adult orientation. So this idea that you talk about recruitment, but even the experience, we cannot sell an iPad as a laptop.
Greg.
Yeah, and back, Joe, to some of the things you were talking about with the marketing element of it. I think when we started up with Melik and Unity to try to figure out, what path we were going to take to generate the demand and capture it and so forth, there was no particular persona that existed for this. And that can be a very scary thing for both marketers and for college presidents, even those that are, as forward-thinking as Melik. But there was confidence there that it's there. It just, no one has ever found it before. It won't show up in a SIP code in a research report or anything like that. And we blazed a trail together. And I think finding the right message and delivering it to the prospective student in the right place at the right time was the key to it. And we had to blaze a trail. And Malik talked about the iterative part of it. Not all of it was figured out from the beginning. There was definitely vision and a commitment, which was really important to getting it done. But kind of blazing that trail and figuring out the parts and pieces of things that we didn't know and iterating on it, and then finding what was there along the way and doubling down on it was a key to it. And the audience was there. The audience was looking for what Unity had to present to it, and the results that are being achieved today are a testament to it.
Yeah, I mean, to Greg's point, you hear a lot of institutions talk about being innovative, but then the first question they ask you is who else is doing it. They ask you
so
to be
right on. By the way, that's so right.
Right? They ask you to be innovative, but then they say, what are the benchmarks? They ask you to be innovative, and they want to know, guarantee you cannot try something new but only be willing to do. I mean, this is a higher ed thing, right? Because like 60 years ago, I understand that. But we are an industry that is predicated on taking 2 years to make a decision. Where adding a new major is the pinnacle of innovation. And so by saying, I can't be innovative and be bound to tradition, be bound to what has come before me, be bound to pedagogy that is tried and true, then don't ask me to be innovative. Tell me to drill more in this particular well. And that well is dwindling. And I think that's the issue. All of these colleges who are talking about innovation are using, they're looking for certainties that don't exist. And many, at least for me in working with some of my peers, having an initiative fail is such an affront to our reputations. I mean, there's a university, Joe, that closed recently that had more students than we did. And I can only guess that the fear of their reputational hit for actually trying to make profound change was less desirable than just closing. And that's what's wrong with our industry.
Yeah, that's a really good point about universities right now, because you do wonder, right, from a board of trustees standpoint, from a digital experience standpoint, is it easier to just fold it than really innovate with the risk? And you said it, Melik, and you know this to be true, and I do too. We're going to be innovative. We would like to know the other 5 universities that has done this before we do. And it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. If you're going to be innovative, that means doing something nobody else is doing. But we are, as an industry, designed to prevent innovation. That's when you talk about 2 years, the pinnacle of innovation being a product or a new program. It's because we've designed it to be 2 years. Even if you took out everything and you just went right to the accrediting body, it'd still take a little bit of time, but not the amount of time it takes to go through committees and update this person and update that person. We designed that. And the reason why it all looks the same is because this university took the idea from that university, it took the idea from this university, and so on. So it's like a domino effect, a self-fulfilling prophecy, as it were, and it's very hard to break. And you said something earlier. You said quality and modality, right? Quality can be maintained with different modalities, but you have people that the minute you say we're going to offer this in a different way, will say something like this.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Right? You've got faculty that just go, well, you can't get the same outcome with this program online. It has to be taught on ground. That is the ingrained culture that we work in, and it's very hard to break. And you speak, and I'm bringing this up because you speak about this. You speak about this model of change that you've achieved at Unity, and you speak about it like it was preordained almost, but it has not been easy, and you have to have a steadfast leadership style of breaking glass, so to speak, to get to that point.
Do you know what's the number one question I'm asked, which is really annoying?
How did you do it?
I wish. It's how am I still here?
Well, yeah. Well, I could see that, right? Because the system is designed to take out anyone who pushes the envelope too far on innovation. That's the way systems designed.
Correct. What's been really interesting for me is the first question isn't how did you do it? The first question isn't, it's always how did you survive that?
Yikes!
And then many presidents would go, I'm not going to put my reputation. I mean, you saw an article I wrote not too long ago where I really got upset at all these presidents who are going out there saying everything on their campus is okay, get a consulting gig, and then say their campus is crap. Like, really? Like, seriously? How are we going to change? But to be fair, most presidents, if you were to ask, 17 people on a campus what their job is, some of them tell you they're fundraisers. Some of them, at the end of the day, we were always built to be facilitators because it was never about revenue. It was always about protection. So you talk about not designed to change, absolutely. And your idea or your question about modality and quality, I have seen some really poor in-person learning courses. I once knew somebody who taught them the textbook that they would teach was out of print, and they would photocopy it and give it to students. This is not here. This is
it was Greg. Greg, you were the instructor. You were the instructor, were you, Greg?
We also make it so unfair for faculty members where they graduate from these PhD programs. They've got no pedagogical training. They go to a university, there's no instructional designers, no learning designers, no curriculum designers. And then we say to them, save the world.
Figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, we were never designed to be anything but what we were 18th century ago. And don't get me wrong, the R1s are always going to be R1s, right? The small private elite schools are always going to be there because they are really hedge funds and they are looking to kind of perpetuate their mission. But for the other regional state schools, for the private schools that are tuition driven, I would say up till 5 years ago, it was still even who's going to survive. But now the question is higher education, as is currently constructed, going to survive the next 10 years, especially with AI? And so it's not even who's going to survive anymore. I mean, think about this, Joe. The first institution to figure out a new currency that is not based on the credit hour and to create a rigorous and affordable and accessible curriculum that is not dependent on Title IV is going to be the new university of the future.
Yep. So much to think about there, Greg. I do want to kick it to you, and I want to I do want to preface something that we haven't talked about, but I think it's important because you can't do what you've done with Unity if you go all the way back to what Melik said at the beginning. When you talk to these marketing companies that have their entire product design is the traditional learner and the traditional high school learner getting these things, getting this communication, being nurtured for a year. And then what those companies will do is they sell an upgrade. Like, okay, we've got you work with us on this traditional learner. We're going to go after the adult student too. We're going to sell you this upgrade. And Education Dynamics is sitting over here as basically the market leader for accessing the modern learner. And where do we get stuck in higher ed? We just do the same old because it's easy instead of taking what makes sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, going back to some of the comments I made about the modern learner, like thinking has to evolve. And we sometimes talk to different institutions and presidents, and there are so many institutions out there that need to be working with us and having conversations with us, similar to the ones that Melik was having with us 5 or 6 years ago. We looked at a school that has a similar profile to Unity in Wisconsin, I believe, that was on the brink of shutting down. It's just traditional campus. It's an environmentally oriented college, private college, and their enrollments had been flat for 10 years, and there was no pivot to online. There was no vision or strategy that we could see there. And took a look at that, and we took a look at Unity's trends in enrollment from 2010 through, I think we had data to 2022 or 23 at that point. It's amazing. Those two schools would have been along the same trend line, except something happened in 2019 and Unity's enrollments went due north, on the grid. So it was interesting to compare those two things. And I think for a lot of schools, the moment has already passed for them to be thinking along those lines, but for others, it's not too late to do it. And it takes an evolution in thinking and cutting against the grain and taking the risk of Malik is still here. We're glad that he's still here, and I think he will be here. But you got to take that risk and do it. Like doing the same old is going to result in what we're seeing every day, reading about a new college that's having to close its doors, and that is no good for higher ed, and it's no good for students.
Joe, if I may add to Greg's point, because I agree with it, and I know the college he's talking about. I think a lot of schools think if you actually spend more money just on recruitment and marketing, that you will solve this problem, when in reality, there is a product issue as well.
Oh,
right.
Thank you. It's so right.
And I think where I sometimes get upset for Greg and his team is when I hear secondhand that the colleges they're talking to want to create an online program to create enough money to subsidize their residential program.
Right.
You have to look at them at differentiated product lines. You have to have your own P&Ls for all of them. Maybe one of them can be a loss leader, but this idea that there's the real school and then we have to work with Greg to do the online so that we can pay for the real school is fundamentally why these colleges fail. And those who see the two as different but important, different faculty, different staff, different pedagogy, different services, I think are more likely to be successful, because this idea that it's online but has a residential ethos is part of the problem. Yamaha is a good example, right? Yamaha is one company, but you want to tell me the designers of the pianos and the designers of their motorcycles are the same designers? No, but it's still Yamaha.
Or the other bit is, let's say you have an online version of an on-ground program that an institution is selling now, and a lot of them have those because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And instead of going after the modern learner with dollars and cents, you can't just take a program that nobody's already buying and put more money behind it and more people will buy it. They're already not buying it. It doesn't matter how much money you put in it. You have to evolve the educational product to the point where the modern learner wants to buy it. And so there's a whole ecosystem of things that you have to consider, Greg. And I think we saw that too a little bit in our work together, where it was just trying to take something that exists and boost it. And I'm going, you can't just do that. You can't just,
Joe, find me the best salespeople in the world. Now go have them sell 100 million units of Betamax.
Yeah, exactly.
And then get me the dumbest salesperson and then have them sell a Netflix subscription.
Yep.
And to your point, though, just to put a more finer point on it, when we did our market research internally at Unity, especially in our core programs like marine biology, which never had more than 48 students at a time, or animal care, which never had more than 70 students at a time, what we realized was our curriculum, the market, the industry wasn't the problem. People wanted marine biology. People wanted animal care, but we could not get more than 50 to 60 students at the college because the people who wanted it couldn't afford it. And so when we changed our model to say those who want that can have it, and those who can't and are place-bound, we're going to create a completely different product, but keeping the true sense of the curriculum in place. We now have 3,000 marine biology students who focus in aquaculture. What's changed? The delivery mechanism, allowing them to use their own local fauna, their own local flora, their own local communities and economies, where they can work on small aquaculture farms all across the country instead of waiting 4 years and paying that extra $15,000 in alternative loans for room and board. Don't get me wrong. I love those who can afford it. I am glad for those who get a scholarship to experience it. But I'm not going to deprive 10,000 students from getting that knowledge because they can't come and spend 4 years in Maine. And I think that's where some of these colleges get it wrong. It's not a lesser product. It is a different product. I would argue that the technology that goes into the learning designers, the curriculum designers, figuring out ways to assess them in their local community, that is why our residential, our face-to-face and our online programs are not identical, but they do map in outcomes because it's different. And that's where I think people sometimes miss the mark. It's not a singular product.
Greg, I'm guessing this is why you put me and Malik on the panel together, because we work each other up, but he's highly productive. So he's one of the people that I know that can out-talk me about change in higher ed. So he gets all the credit in the world.
Agreed. He's great for a co-host, too. I just get it to sit here and listen to him. It's amazing.
Well, Greg, why don't you anything else you want to add about the modern learner, since this is really a podcast or a series of 6 episodes where we want to cover the modern learner. Is there anything else you want to add from your work, your research?
There's one last thing that I would love for Malik to touch on for just a minute. We barely scratched the surface on new product development, but one of the 3 things that we always come back to is, what is a modern learner looking for? It's, how much does it cost? So the affordability question. How fast can I get it? Which covers a lot of ground in terms of how fast can they access the program, and the flexibility and modality, all of those things. And the last thing is the ROI, which covers a lot of ground as well. And that ground, is partially tied to, what kind of a return can I get on my investment of time and money and so forth. And that is something that does require innovation, especially with the pace of change in technology and the pace and change in need of skills, within the employer universe. So when you think about new product development in terms of programs for a higher ed institution, Malik and I have talked about this before just together, but I love the way he thinks about it. And I'd love for him to share it. And, and I'll steal a little bit of it. And it has to do with failing fast and failing often.
Absolutely. I mean, we launch products, majors, for example, modalities, with the understanding that we design the measures of success prior to launch, so that the decision to kill something or to launch something is not an emotional one. One of the things that I love about my academics at Unity is we actually don't care anymore about majors. My faculty don't identify their value based on our majors, but by the disciplines, because a major is nothing more than an amalgamation of different disciplines that lends you towards a career. So to Greg's point, one is we don't invest enough in launch. So when I look at a program launch, I don't look at whether I'm going to lose money in year 1, but what will this major or this program or this subsidiary be in the black once it's fully matured. So if I'm launching a program today, let's say engineering, and I need 250 students for it to break even, I can't assume that because in year 1 I'm not going to break even, I can't launch it. And I think a lot of universities make decisions on annual cycles. And Greg and I work on this all the time. We have a series of programs that are established, and those, we are looking at them on an annual cycle. But we have programs that we're trying to launch, and we cannot look at the cost of acquisition. We can't look at profitability. We can't look at net revenue in the same way, because it's going to take 2 to 4 years before it's fully matured, but we have to have gates along the way. So the ability to invest, the ability to understand the life cycle, the lifetime value of a student based on your program, and the willingness to have an objective lens in which we can cut something, no matter how much passion we have into it, is a level of discipline and system that most higher education, in a very relational and social capital sort of way, have not been able to adapt to.
By the way, If you offer, no matter how good your product is, if you offer it only once or twice a year and you're hoping to get some profitability out of it in year 2 and you have students, don't wait, by the way. Students don't wait for those cycles to come around. You have to offer a frequency of start date that allows you to put in enough mass so that you can achieve some profitability in year 3 and 4, which you talk to schools about adding more start dates, and it's like you're breaking brains. And that's one of the keys, I think, is the modern learner does not wait. We know their consideration set is very small, 2 to 3 schools, and the amount of time they want to wait is 1 to 2 weeks before, so maybe a month, and that's it. And
to give Greg and his team a compliment, one of the reasons why I've worked with them for as long as I have is because they are not obsequious. They are constantly telling me everything that I'm doing wrong. They're constantly pushing back at some of the decisions we want to make. They're constantly showing us the data. For example, we know now that if we can't package a student on their financial aid within 48 hours, if I cannot get my team to package daily, if I cannot get my team to do transcript evaluations and give a degree audit within 48 hours, I can beat the small private residential school that's going out of business, but I will lose that student to a number one of our competitors. So to your point, Joe, this idea that, and imagine if those decisions had to be made by a committee and had to be made by people who are going to feel a sense of loss. And so at Unity, one of the things that we've done is each and every one of my positions has something called role, scope, and authority. What decision do they get to make? And so when Greg is working with somebody who has the ability and the authority to launch a program, kill a program, move a process, he doesn't have to wait for them to go create a committee and come back in 6 months. He can get an answer in 48 hours. And that's where I think a lot of colleges who have not had to make that change are still doing well. But once they hit that cliff where they actually have to change their process, that's when you're going to know if they're resilient enough as an organization. And I think that's where Greg's team has been very, very good. They tell us, we don't always agree with them. And it took them a few years to figure out that they weren't going to lose our business for being honest with us.
And we also, I think we held Malik back a little bit too.
Yeah, I know. It's really fun when the partner is like, slow down, dude. Like, no, seriously. I'd love to take, we'll get there, I swear.
Well, there you have it, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Education Elevated mini-series on the EdUp Experience podcast, brought to you by Education Dynamics. We hope today's conversation has sparked some ideas and given you a fresh perspective on serving the modern learner. If you're looking for more resources and insights, be sure to check out Education Dynamics and mark your calendars for the Insights EDU 2025 conference in New Orleans from February 12th to 14th. I know I will be there, and so will Elvin, and Valentine's Day is my birthday, so we're going to have a very good time. It's the premier event. Insights EDU is the premier event for higher education leaders who want to stay ahead of the curve and master the art of serving today's modern learners. Register today at insightsedu.com. And of course, we'll be back next month with another episode of Education Elevated, Creating Durability with the Modern Learner mini-series event. Until then, of course, we'll be back tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that with brand new episodes of the EdUp Experience podcast. I want to thank my guests, my guest host. He's Greg Clayton, and our guest of honor, Dr. Melik Peter Curry of Unity Environmental University. And of course, thank you, Education Dynamics, for sponsoring this mini-series. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.